Hey folks, thank you for being patient. Hello everybody watching here at True North and everywhere else. You can go ahead. So welcome, this is Bravo Plant-Based Channel. I am Chef Bravo here, creator of BravoPV.com, which is all tied in. And today I am going to make a couple of nut/seed-free dressings. Okay. I am going to do one of the most popular ones that we do here, with our lemon parsley. And then I'm going to give you the nut-free version of that. And then I'm going to do another one. And rather than just tell you ingredients, what I really want to share with you is the thought process, so that if you are at home and you'd like to come up with a dressing that is nut-free, you don't have to kill yourself looking for recipes. You just think about what ingredients you have and how those can be a dressing for you. Make sense? Okay. All right. So very simple. Keep the camera rolling this time. Last week we kind of cut it off too soon, and there were some great questions by you guys, and so these guys messed up. So we'll just keep it rolling. If at any point in time you have a question, please raise your hand. I know all the material. If I talk a little bit, the rest of the gaps are filled in my head because I already know the stuff. But if there are some gaps and you don't understand, how do we get from point A to point B, just please ask and I'll be happy to answer. All right? Sound good? Okay. So the first one I'm going to do is, or talk about is the very popular lemon parsley dressing. Okay, so for that one, what we do is we get some lemon juice, fresh squeezed lemon juice, which we're going to add here, about half of that. And then we do some garlic cloves, okay, raw garlic cloves, and probably that much. We're not going to make a whole lot. And then, of course, we're going to call it a lemon parsley dressing, so we need to have some parsley in here. Okay. So, all right, come on in. Actually, I always forget this part. Now that I've said everything I have to say, I want to make sure all you guys have visual on this. And then they just, excuse me, they just asked me to speak up, so it's almost like I'm going to yell so everybody can hear. So far in here, I have my lemon juice, garlic cloves, and parsley, okay? And so this recipe would then get finished with some raw cashews, okay? And that would be our normal recipe that we do, okay? And so the thought process here is that the lemon juice provides a sour sort of flavor in here. We combine that with the spicy flavor of the raw garlic, okay? Then we add some parsley in there to get those nice herbal savory tones, okay? The cashews are in this dressing particularly to give the dressing texture, okay? So that we get this nice creamy, just a nice creamy consistency to it, okay? However, there's a lot of people that worry about the calorie intake, okay? And so having a alternative to cashews or nuts in a dressing is a good thing to have, okay? Now, when I mentioned that, I'm trying to pass on some knowledge to you guys so that you can think about what ingredients you have at home and how you can turn that into a dressing. The idea is to just try to figure out what that particular ingredient is doing. For this dressing, the cashews are there for nothing else other than that texture, okay? I call it a lemon parsley dressing, okay? So my lemon and the parsley are there to give it flavor, okay? So when somebody tastes this, they are going to be expecting lemon and parsley flavor. After that, they want to make sure that this particular dressing works like an actual dressing, okay? Because we're doing a SOS-free dressing recipe. So it still has to have that functionality of a regular dressing, but if I'm calling it a lemon parsley, then it damn well better taste like lemon parsley. There are some others that I do, right off the top of my head, I can think of a raspberry walnut dressing, okay? In that dressing, the walnuts are there specifically for flavor. Okay? They also provide texture, but I have to have that walnut flavor in that dressing, otherwise, you know, I'm what do I call it? I'm misleading the customer, so to speak, okay? So for this particular recipe, the cashews are there just for texture, okay? They're sort of the thickening agent, so to speak. I like using cashews in a dressing or sauces sometimes because raw cashews don't impart any flavor. They don't add flavor, okay? As long as they're raw. If you toast them, you know, in a pan or in the oven, then you will taste cashews. But as long as they're raw, they sort of become whatever else you got in there, okay? So that's why I like using them. But, as we mentioned, we're going to get rid of the cashews, and now we got to come up with something else. So the idea then is, what do we use? And again, we go back to, well, what were the cashews doing? They were providing a thickener, okay? Okay, so what I'm going to use in replacement of that is, I have here a combination of some diced fennel and diced turnips, which I steamed, okay? Now why am I using fennel and turnips? Because they're white, actually. Or mostly white. So once I steam them, they are this sort of white, sort of translucent kind of a thing. So they're not going to mess with my color here, which I want it to be green, okay? They're not going to mess up the color. So if I'm calling this a lemon parsley dressing, somebody would expect it's going to be green somehow because of the parsley, and it's going to taste like lemon, okay? So the turnips and the fennel are going to give me that thickener, and they're going to do that simply because it's just sort of material, okay? It's that fiber in there in the vegetables that are going to act as a thickener. Now, this is very important. I mentioned that they are steamed, okay? If I were to roast them instead of steam them, number one, I'm messing with the color because now I'm caramelizing the sugars and the fennel and the turnips, okay? So now my green is going to have some sort of brownish hue to it, okay? Which is already messing with it. And number two, if I caramelize the sugars and the fennel and the turnips, I am making those pronounced flavors, okay? Now I am definitely going to taste them, okay? And again, if this is a lemon parsley dressing, I don't necessarily want hints of fennel and turnip, okay? That happens because if I roast these, I am evaporating the water out of them, thus concentrating their flavor. But if I steam them, I keep a good amount of moisture in them, and those natural sugars don't caramelize. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, other items you could use, I would have preferred to use some celery root, but we didn't have any. So we turned to fennel and turnips. So celery root is another one you can certainly use. Again, cut it, peel it, dice it, steam it, and it's the same thing. If you just steam it, it just provides that material so that your dressing can get thickened in the blender. All right? Yes? I know. The camera wants to point here.
I saw you were looking at it.
No, they already know what I look like. Yes, we got some questions.
What is fennel?
Fennel, it's a vegetable. It's in the, oh boy, I'm not going to know the, I'm not going to remember the family thing. It's sort of like this bulb that is underground, and then the stalks sort of come up.
Isn't it celery root? No.
No, No. Different vegetable. So celery root is a specific variety of celery that gets cultivated just for the root. If you saw a whole celery and celery root put together, you have this nice sort of root, round-ish root with all these sort of branches sort of getting all intertwined and sort of braided. But the celery itself would be kind of anemic looking, okay? So those get cultivated just for the root part. The anemic-y celery, that usually gets discarded. Whereas actual celery that you buy at the store and you want to buy some actual celery, that is a different variety, as far as I know. Okay? Yes?
What about using white beans as a thickener?
You can use white beans. I haven't gotten to that part, but we can jump right to it. Another quote-unquote thickener to use in a dressing can be white beans, okay? You definitely want to use white beans, again, for the reasons that I just spoke about, okay? However, the one sort of drawback for me to use beans is that I talked about the cashews not imparting any flavor. I feel that if I use white beans, they definitely add flavor. So I can taste sort of the bean in there in the dressing. And I'm trying to make it as invisible as possible. That's why I make sure that it's white veggies and that they are steamed. Okay. But nothing wrong if you decide, hey, you know what, I'd like to have some beans in the dressing. It's another way for me to add beans to my diet, because if I serve myself a big bowl of beans, I'm not likely to eat them. But if I sort of hide them in the dressing, then that'll make it easier. Then sure, go ahead. All right. Now, I'm going to add a couple of scoops to this, and we'll see how it goes. Texture-wise, a couple of scoops here we'll give it a shot here. It might be sort of the equivalent to like a half a cup of nuts. In the nuts, there is no water at all, okay? So they're going to be a quote-unquote a better thickener for the dressing, okay? There is some moisture here in the steamed veggies, okay? So it's not a one-for-one kind of a thing. And the trick is, if I'm going to call this a dressing, it has to behave and function like a dressing, okay? So the first thing I check is the thickness of it, okay? Nothing worse than getting yourself a plate of salad and then you pour a dressing and then it's so watery that it becomes soup, okay? That's just not tempting at all, so to speak. That's the first thing I check, because again, when I pour this, I want it to be thick so that it coats the lettuce and the veggies. If I use it kind of as a sauce, because a lot of my dressings get used as sauces, I'm going to pour this on top of some steamed veggies. I don't want it to, again, turn into a soup. I also don't want it to be so thick that I'm fighting to get it out of the container and it becomes more of a glob, sort of a hummus thing on top, okay? I don't want that either, okay? I want to be able to mix the ingredients in the bowl or in the plate and, again, make it so that it's a functional dressing. Make sense? Okay. The next part is, even more important, is taste, okay? You gotta taste it. I already see that it's green, so that's not, not a problem at all. It's slightly on the sour side, so I'm going to add just one more thing of garlic. and the rest of my parsley, because I actually did not, I certainly got the lemon right away, but the parsley was just nowhere to be found. So, we blend again. And there we go. I know that it didn't change the thickness of it because all I did was add 1 garlic clove and more parsley. So I know the thickness is still there. It got a little bit greener, which is nice. Much better. I can taste, still got that nice first initial lemon. But the parsley then comes in and it gives me a nice lingering finish. Where I go, okay, lemon parsley, I got the lemon right away, and the parsley is just like, I'm tasting it, I'm tasting it, I'm tasting it. Yeah, that was nice. Okay. Very important that you taste as you go along, whether it's a soup or a dressing, any sort of dish. I always keep, spoons nearby so I can taste as I go. Because, for example, for this guy, the lemons I use today are going to be different from the ones that I'm going to use next week because they're going to be bigger or smaller, more or less acidic. We might decide to get some Meyer lemons instead of regular lemons, which means the acidity is going to be very different. Okay, so tasting as you go along is crucial, very crucial. Make sense? Okay. So now, we've kind of covered that, how do we substitute nuts if the nuts are going to be, or if nuts are called for to begin with, okay? What can we add instead of the nuts? Same as if it's sesame seeds, again, some of these white vegetables. I mentioned celery root would be another alternative. Parsnips would be another one, okay? But now, sometimes the dressing itself, or the thickness of the dressing itself, comes just from the ingredients themselves. Okay? And I'll show you what that means. In here I have some roasted bell peppers. Got some red and some green. Or actually, these are roasted bell peppers, red bell peppers. And I have a couple of roasted poblano peppers. Okay. So just how I was talking about making sure I don't roast the fennel and the turnips so I don't make them a pronounced flavor for the other dressing. Roasting ingredients when you want that pronounced flavor because you're going to call it a roasted pepper dressing is a good idea. If I were to make this using just raw peppers, it would not work as well, okay? Because I have all the moisture in the peppers, I haven't caramelized the natural sugars, I have not evaporated that natural moisture, okay? So the flavor is not going to be as intense, as concentrated as if I had them roasted. Make sense? Okay. So now, my dressing, my peppers go in. Okay. Now what I want to give this is just a little bit of, what do you call it? The sort of a longer finish, some depth. That's the word I was looking for. I want to give this some depth. So in order to do that, I'm going to add a little bit of shallot. Okay, shallots are in the onion family. Okay, so I'm going to do about half an onion or half a shallot here. I don't want this to taste like shallot. I just want a touch of it to give me some depth, a little bit of lingering flavor, so it doesn't go, okay, roasted pepper and then gone. Okay, I want that nice lingering effect just like I got the parsley over here, okay? So, a little bit of shallots, and then a little bit of spice, in this case some coriander. And this is actually one of the recipes off of my first book, so this is a roasted bell pepper and cilantro dressing. Which actually, I'm going to add the cilantro here in just a bit, and you'll see why. So, peppers go in, shallot and the coriander. And now we're going to get some volume in here, and we do that by adding some vegetable broth. Okay? And when you're making a dressing with using that particular ingredient as your both your flavoring profile and your thickener, a good rule of thumb is you add broth until you reach the same level there on the blender as your ingredient. So just a tiny bit more. And so now my broth and my ingredients are sort of level. Everybody see that? That is usually a good starting point. See that this does not quite have enough broth in here as it's blending. The bottom part here, the blender is going, and sort of the thicker parts here, the veggies are sort of stuck. So you can see how blended, and now this is more of a chopped. Everybody see that? Okay. Which is good. Okay. I can always add a little bit more vegetable broth once it's in there, and I've made it too runny. I can't take it out. Okay. So. Just a small splash. I'm going to give this a quick check. Okay, again, we're checking for texture. It's just a slightly thicker than I'd like it to. So I'm going to add just another little splash. Now, you guys can all see how this is sort of almost red or orange. We'll call it orange all throughout. Okay? This is now when I'm going to add my cilantro. And I'm going to look for the cilantro to look chopped up in there. Okay? Had I added the cilantro in the very beginning, I would have come up with this sort of muddy color flavor, or muddy colored dressing, okay? Because it's just like when you're a kid and you're mixing paints. If you mix red with green, you end up with brown, okay? But if I get it just right, where I add the cilantro towards the end and it just chops it up, I have this sort of reddish orange with all those little bits and pieces of green. Make sense? Just like that. Okay? Not a whole lot. Alright. Now, I think you can see it in there. All the little green pieces chopped up throughout. Check on my texture. It's still a little bit slightly thicker than I want, but that's okay. Now I'm interested in the flavor. With roasted bell peppers, they go from like this sort of almost savory to a very sweet, because again, we concentrated the flavor, okay? So it starts out as a very sort of sweet flavor right away. But then all that depth behind it comes in, so that just slight hint of onion and the coriander and the cilantro follow that, okay? So that you don't go, oh, this is sweet, oh man, oh wait, actually no, it's not all sweet. There is some spice behind it. So okay, I like that, that's good. Okay, there is some flavor contrast in there, so it's not all one flavor and then nothing else. Make sense? Okay. So, how you can use this is, for example, I like cutting up some pineapple, roasting it in the oven, okay, just like we did the bell peppers here. And now the pineapple, once roasted, it becomes that sort of thick but pronounced flavor that once you add the other liquid, whether it be a fruit juice, a pineapple juice, or a vegetable broth, that pineapple flavor will be pronounced in there, okay? And it gives you that nice texture. Other things I can think of, mushrooms. Again, roasted mushrooms, intensify that mushroom flavor, and then we add other ingredients to balance that very earthy flavor of the mushrooms, okay? But you still have that thickener, that fiber that gives you that consistency for the dressing that you're looking for. Make sense? Okay. Any questions?
The mushrooms you roast also, did you say? Did I miss that?
Say again?
The mushrooms you roast also?
Yeah.
Okay.
The mushrooms are. Now, the idea behind roasting the peppers or the mushrooms or the pineapple or the something else, again, it's to intensify its flavor and to dehydrate it. So that once it goes in the blender, then you add some vegetable broth to give you the volume and the consistency you're looking for. But because you concentrated that flavor, it's going to be predominant in there, if that makes sense. Yes?
How long do you roast your peppers for?
How long do we roast peppers for? So a pepper we take, let's see. So imagine this is a whole pepper and then I cut it in half. I scoop out the seeds, okay? And then it gets roasted in a sheet pan, baking tray with the skin side up. 400 degrees, somewhere in the 15 to 20 minute range. You could also broil them, which actually works really well, because what you want is to sort of roast the skin off, so to speak, and then it peels off easily.
Oh, so you don't want the skin in the dressing?
No.
Oh, okay.
For two reasons. When you roast peppers, the skin does turn, they charge,
Right.
essentially, so it goes more into the black color, and I don't want to serve a black, sort of dressing, so to speak.
Okay.
Also, skin is tough to chop up even for a nice, blender. So you can end up with little pieces of pepper skin that sort of gets stuck in your teeth and in your gums, and it's just a nuisance. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Good. All right. Well, do you guys have any questions on anything else, food related, food equipment, food something?
I was wondering if you're dressing the kelp pea dressing is in one of your books?
The question is the kelp pea dressing in the books? It is in the Bravo Express cookbook. Yeah.
Second one?
The second one, yeah. For that one, since we're talking about that sort of thickener, the peas are that thickener, okay? We have made that dressing. It has a slight amount of cashews, but we've made it completely cashew free, and it still works because those peas, once you blend them up, they give you that nice thickener in there. And it's also that one of the two pronounced flavors in there, so it works really well.
It's really good.
No, thank you.
So, do you always soak the cashews, or you never soak them, or?
The question is, do I soak cashews? And the answer is almost never, okay? If I soak cashews, I'm adding water along with the cashews to the blender, or to the sauce, the dressing, whatever it is. And the less water I add to my food, the less flavor. Yeah, because I'm diluting it, I'm watering it down.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Question?
So if you make a batch this size, say at the beginning of the week, how long will it keep?
The shelf life of these dressings is probably about 3 days. That is one of the quote-unquote advantages of using nuts or seeds. The natural fat content in there will give it a little bit more shelf life. But if don't have those in there, and there is no oil and there is no salt, there's nothing to sort of preserve it. So 3 days is probably my guess.
Does it get worse with each day? Or is it kind of like a use it?
With each day, you start losing color, and then the flavor starts to change.
So best to do it fresh.
Best to do it fresh, yeah. So I would say, I always like to say, whatever you're gonna eat today and tomorrow. Yeah. Yes?
The kelp, back to the kelp, pea dressing, can we make that as a soup?
And you make it as a soup. You could, but you would not probably like it as much, okay? A dressing is this sort of very thick, or thicker, dish. If you were to serve that as a soup, people would expect a soup consistency. Therefore, in order to get it there, we would have to dilute it down with some broth just to get it right. And then at that point, that
Something
intense kelp and pea flavor might not necessarily be there. Okay. So the texture always changes the dynamic. Okay, it can change the flavor as well. Yeah. Any other questions?
What about avocado instead of nuts?
We can use avocado instead of nuts.
Like in a green dressing.
Yeah, although people, for a lot of people, if you're trying to get away from the nuts because of the calorie intake, avocado also falls in that category. But yes, absolutely, if it's more of I don't want to use nuts because I'm allergic, but I can eat avocado, then absolutely. However, it worked for the lemon parsley dressing because it's green. If you're trying to make a creamy bell pepper dressing and you're adding some green stuff to that, then it might not necessarily work. It may or it may not. So, yeah. Anybody else? This is your chance to ask whatever you want.
You're gonna get mad at me. That soup, the soup that you had today,
The pea and fennel soup?
Yeah.
That is not written down, if that's your question.
So when are you gonna write it down?
Probably not for a while,
Book 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we have to wait.
What type of blender are you using?
What type of blender am I using? This is a Vitamix blender, which is probably my top choice for blenders. I forget the specific model that this is. If you're interested in buying a Vitamix, I always recommend the 5200 model. That is the one to buy. Yeah. It's sort of like home blenders. Then you got your higher end Ninjas and Blendtex, and then there's Vitamix, and then the 5200 model on top of all this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Once you go Vitamix, you don't go back.
Yeah.
And they last forever. And they last forever.
Yeah.
And they come with a great manufacturer warranty behind it.
Yeah.
All right, are we all good? Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.